Welcome back, my friends. Rush Limbaugh. And despite it all, having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have. And the reason for that is, and I am doing what I was born to do. Okay, I've got the Jose Rodriguez soundbite that I referenced in a couple of Dianne Feinsteins, but I don't want to be hurried into before the breaks. I'm going to save them for immediately after the next break coming up at the bottom of the hour. And I want to remind you something. The demonization of the CIA is as old as the CIA. In fact, the demonization of CIA goes back to the old OSS even prior to the CIA. But the demonization of the CIA and their use of waterboarding is a textbook example of how the media and the rest of the Democrat Party establish a lie and repeat it until it becomes a fact. And I'm going to tell you, torture isn't torture. Government shutdown is not a government shutdown. And immigration reform isn't immigration reform. We're losing the language. But these people are hell-bent on convincing as many people in this country as they can that we are rotten to the core, because all we do is torture. We don't interrogate with valor and with character. No. And remember, as Mrs. Clinton said recently, we don't treat our enemies with understanding and empathy. No, we torture them. Well, as these people are using it, torture isn't torture, just like immigration reform is not immigration reform, it's amnesty. And just as a government shutdown that everybody's afraid of is not really a government shutdown. So the left continues to hijack the language and redefine important terms. And the opposing party just stands aside and lets it all happen. A demonization of the CIA and their use of waterboard. This is textbook of how you establish a lie and repeat it until it becomes a fact. You know that the U.S. military waterboards, particularly our special forces people, they go through waterboard training. It's part of their survival training because it's likely they're going to encounter it if captured. A grand total 3 terrorists were waterboarded 11 years ago, which has now produced thousands of pages of valuable intel that the Democrats are saying is all invalid. That they don't believe it's true because it was elicited with torture. But it was that info that eventually led to the killing of Osama bin Laden, for crying out loud. And predictably, Senator Mccain is now on the Senate floor endorsing what Dianne Feinstein said, basically concluding that whatever we did at Guantanamo Bay stained our national honor. Even though he understands it, sometimes in a fog of war, people do things they wouldn't otherwise do. But that's no excuse. And we got the lecture on our values, and we must continue to act as though we understand that all men have certain basic human rights, and we will be the one nation on earth that does not violate them or torture them in the process of finding out. And then he went on to say that you can't trust what you're told using these kinds of techniques because the sufferer will lie, will say anything he thinks his captor will believe in order to end his suffering. So it's Pile on America Day again on Jonathan Gruber Day. This is not an accident. Jonathan Gruber, you're going to have to look long and hard to find it, is testifying before a House committee today on his lies, misrepresentations, and insults to the American people, his role in making sure this flawed Obamacare legislation was passed by virtue of lying to the American people. And it's simply being dwarfed by the news that the United States tortured 7-8 years ago. How many times have they brought this up? How many times have they kept making a point? And I'm telling you, it's going to keep going. Movies and TV shows are still being made about it. Anyway, audio soundbite time. We played a number of these soundbites in the past. I've got one here. Let me see. This is not the one that I just mentioned, but it works. Back on April 29, 2012, Leslie Stahl interviewed former CIA interrogator Jose Rodriguez. And Jose Rodriguez, I believe, was the guy who ran the program. Jose Rodriguez ran the CIA's interrogation program. Leslie Stahl, during the interview, was beside herself. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She says, so what happens? You know, you're torturing Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. What, does he break down? Does he cry? Does he fall apart? What happens to him?
No, he gets a good night's sleep. He gets his Ensure. By the way, he was very heavy when he came to us, and he lost 50 pounds.
What, his Ensure? You mean like people in the hospital who drink that stuff?
Yes. Dietary manipulation was part of these techniques.
So sleep deprivation, dietary manipulation, I mean, this is Orwellian stuff. The United States doesn't do that.
Well, we do.
It is the soundbite I had hoped for. It is. I quickly read it and didn't get the last line. Well, we do. Yes, and he's, you know, he's on the edge here because he's taunting her. She doesn't know it. Oh, yeah. Dietary manipulation was part of these dire techniques. You mean you gave him Ensure? You mean that stuff cancer patients get in the hospital? Yes. Dietary manipulation was part of these dire techniques. Well, so sleep deprivation, dietary manipulation, I mean, this is Orwellian stuff. The U.S. doesn't do that. Well, we do. We do. I mean, this is right up there. This is in my all-time top 5 audio soundbites. Nothing will outdo Nick Robertson at CNN in Tahrir Square. That will always remain. Just like Barack the Magic Negro being one of my all-time favorite soundbites or song parodies. But here, listen to this again. Now that you know what's coming and going by, I want you to listen to Leslie Stahl just beside herself. She's in shock here. She can't believe that we do these horrible things. She just can't believe it. And by the way, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, everything he told us was true. It has been confirmed. And he set the record for length of time withstanding waterboarding. I think it's a world record, in fact, that he holds. I'm not saying this flippantly. He does hold the world record for being able to hold out for longer than anybody else on waterboarding, and I think it's something like 75 seconds. Which is a long time. Oh, by the way, look, I don't like doing this. I don't like citing television shows for evidence of things because it isn't. Television shows are just that. They are scripted performances and not real. Therefore, it's a sad thing. It's a sad commentary that you have to watch a TV show to find out how truly evil our enemies are. I find that somewhat appalling. Today, we're being told how rotten we are. Today, this is all about the Senate and Republicans and Democrats joining together to describe once again how evil and mean and beneath our standards the American nation was, particularly back during the second term of the Bush administration. There's not a word being spoken about why all this went on. There's not a word being said. There's not a single description of the evil that is the Taliban, that is Al-Qaeda, that is ISIS. No, the evil is being portrayed today as being located at Club Gitmo and whatever other black sites the CIA is violating the law in using by rendering prisoners under cover of darkness to black sites, i.e. prisons that nobody knows exist in far-flung corners. Really is. And that's why I say I'm just worn out with this. I'm worn out having to hear about how rotten my country is. Particularly in a contest with Al-Qaeda or in a contest with the Taliban. But that's what we're getting today. And it's helping to cover up what a reprobate Jonathan Gruber is. and what an absolute fraud and lie all of Obamacare was and remains. I did a morning update commentary today and a further news story that I have in the stack of stuff about all the doctors dropping out of Obamacare. There's a legitimate shortage of actual treating doctors that's about to rear its ugly head. More and more doctors are pulling out of it. It's a disaster, top to bottom. And it's being covered up so the Democrat Party and the media can join forces and once again tell the American people how rotten their country is. And let me just say, I'm not at all saying the United States is perfect. I'm not at all saying that we haven't made mistakes. But to not even have a tacit acknowledgement that we are the good guys, that's offensive. And by the way, it's very worrisome when, to at least every member of a particular political party, the Democrat Party, in their eyes, the United States is not the good guys. That's a problem. But that's what we're being treated to today. So here again, listen to this, knowing full well what's coming in a couple of Die-Fi sound bites coming after this. This is Jose Rodriguez, who ran the CIA interrogation program at Club Gitmo, being interviewed by Leslie Stahl. He wrote a book about it, and so that's why he was on 60 Minutes. And she was beside herself, learning what went on. She says, so what happens, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, after you waterboarded a guy, after you tortured him, after you beat him up, after you almost killed him, after you treated him mean and all that? What happened? Did he break down? Did he cry? Did he fall apart on you?
No, he gets a good night's sleep. He gets his insure. By the way, he was very heavy when he came to us, and he lost 50 pounds.
What, his insure? You mean like people in the hospital who drink that stuff?
Yes. Dietary manipulation was part of these techniques.
So sleep deprivation, dietary manipulation, I mean, this is Orwellian stuff. The United States doesn't do that.
Well, we do.
I don't know, folks. I just love this. Yes, giving a terrorist who masterminded the 9/11 attacks a can of Ensure is a dire interrogation technique. Yes, it was part of these dire techniques. He's just openly mocking her. She didn't even know it. And now here is Dianne Feinstein, who is leading the show on the floor of the Senate today with the release of the committee report on just how rotten the CIA is. We have two sound bites, and this is the first.
History will judge us by our commitment to a just society governed by law and the willingness to face an ugly truth and say never again. The CIA's actions a decade ago are a stain on our value and on our history. The release of this 500-page summary cannot remove that stain, but it can and does say to our people and the world that America is big enough to admit when it's wrong and confident enough to learn from its mistakes. Releasing this report is an important step to restore our values and show the world that we are, in fact, a just and lawful society.
See? You see what I mean? The whole premise here is that we are the problem. We have lost our values. We have embarrassed ourselves before the world, and we are a stain on the world because we lost our value, and it's a stain on our history, and therefore history will judge us this way, and we want history to judge us by our commitment to a just society governed by law and the willingness to admit that we were wrong and it'll never happen again. That's what we want the world saying about us. We want the world to respect us and to love us because the U.S. admits when it's wrong. And the U.S., when it's wrong, promises to never do it again, like we are a little child needing to be sent to face the corner for not eating our peas. I should take it back. For cramming our peas down the throats of our mothers, for making us eat them when we don't want to. That's right. We are big enough to admit when we are wrong, and we are confident to learn from our mistakes, because we realize that when we lose our values, lose any authority to condemn anyone else. So when we become bad people, we can't accuse anybody else of being bad. And for what it's worth, here's the next soundbite. These are just two soundbites that basically summarize what it took her 45 minutes to read.
They describe brutal, around-the-clock interrogations, especially of Abu Zubaydah, in which multiple coercive techniques were used in combination and with substantial repetition. It was an ugly, visceral description. The summary also indicated that Abu Zubaydah and al-Nashiri did not, as a result of the use of these so-called EITs, provide the kind of intelligence that led the CIA to stop terrorist plots or arrest additional suspects.
Now, keep in mind, a whopping 3 terrorists were waterboarded and punished in the way that Dianne Feinstein described. 3 murderers. 3 mass murderers were subjected to this treatment. Congress was briefed about all of these practices several times. Top Democrats were briefed, including Pelosi, despite her claims to the contrary. You remember that? There was a big controversy. She was told about all this and never raised it. In fact, this is all coming back to me now. She was told about it and never complained once until the political opportunity arose. The Democrats knew about this long ago. Didn't say a word about it. Much of it, by the way, turns out not to be true either. Senate staffers wrote this thing after the CIA refused to be cooperative with Senate staffers because they didn't trust them to keep all of this secret. Quick time out. Back after this. Don't go away.